50 Cent is, without a doubt, one of the toughest men the hip-hop industry has ever seen. Everyone knows the story. He was shot 9 times at point-blank range and left for dead, but somehow he managed to survive and made a full recovery and went on to have a legendary music career. Regardless, the shooting was a shocking event, but unfortunately, not all that surprising considering where Cent came from and the events of the last 24 hours before he got shot. Several moving parts, including a drug lord, the neighborhood, a diss track, and a history of drug-related activity, all played a role in the shooting. South Jamaica, Queens. I want to open this by talking about where 50 Cent grew up because it established just what kind of environment the rapper was in when he was shot down. There are very few neighborhoods where a rising star could be shot so many times in broad daylight. Without a clear understanding of where he came from, this story will remain incomplete. Going about it this way will also help establish just how dangerous the area was and why all the trouble felt almost inevitable. Alright, let's get into it. Curtis James Jackson III, better known to fans as 50 Cent, was born and raised in the South Jamaica neighborhood in Queens. Unfortunately, the rapper had a pretty difficult childhood. His mother was a hustler and drug dealer and died when he was just 8 years old. To make matters worse, his father bailed on him after this happened, which meant that Jackson was raised by his grandparents from a very young age. In an interview with MTV, he spoke about how his grandmother broke the news to him about his mother's death. He said, "My grandmother and them told me, your mother's not coming home," he recollected nonchalantly. "She's not going to come back to pick you up. You're going to stay with us now." That's when I started adjusting to the streets a little bit. But growing up in South Jamaica was far from easy. Back in the 80s, the neighborhood had basically been taken over by the crack cocaine epidemic. At the same time, a young 50 Cent, known as Boo Boo back then, was struggling to survive. While growing up with his grandparents, 50 Cent wrote about how cutthroat things were in his autobiography, where he said, "My sneakers would be torn, my clothes dirty, and my skin ashy." The rapper knew he deserved better and began dealing crack when he was just 12 years old. It was easy for him to get into the business because his aunts and uncles made up his first customers. Entering the drug trade coincided with a massive change in how South Jamaica was operating. In 1988, a rookie cop was shot dead while he was guarding a witness. This changed everything. The murder became national news and law enforcement came down hard on the neighborhood while hunting down hitmen working for Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols, who was thought of as the unofficial godfather of South Jamaica. Nichols was the drug kingpin in the region, ruling with an iron fist. But his reign of terror would come to an end in 1992, confessed to murdering a police officer and 2 more people, including his ex-girlfriend. Fat Cat had been arrested a few years earlier, but still had enough power to pull strings from behind bars. Fat Cat got a 25-year life sentence and a 40-year federal sentence to serve concurrently. Back in 2022, he was granted parole and transferred to federal custody till 2026. Well over 3 decades after his incarceration, Fat Cat had the time to do some soul searching, and in a letter to the state parole board, he wrote, "The past 36 years has given me a lot of time to reflect and be honest with myself that selling drugs was no shortcut to success." But back in the late 80s, with cops around every corner, this meant that drug deals could no longer go down in the light of day, and dealers had to adjust to this new reality. This murder played a big role in putting 50 Cent on the same path as his mother, the path of the hustler. The future rapper was quick to adapt, saying, "If the hood was cocaine, then the rookie cop's murder was like baking soda, and an angry police force was the fire that cooked up new hustlers like me." In a strange, twisted way, Fat Cat Nichols played a vital role in helping Curtis Jackson discover some really important things about himself. 50 Cent managed to keep him really busy during this time. He wasn't just dealing drugs, but he also got into boxing. He really took to the sport and would spend a lot of time at a local gym opened up by an older drug dealer from the neighborhood. According to the rapper himself, if he wasn't in school or on the streets dealing crack, he was in the gym. He didn't spend so much time boxing just because he liked it though. It also helped keep him safe on the streets. We all know 50 Cent as a rapper, but he was allegedly a good enough boxer to make it to the Junior Olympics. Cent spent most of the late 80s and early 90s as a drug dealer, but in 1994, his life began to catch up to him. He got arrested twice in quick succession, once for selling crack to an undercover police officer, and the second time when law enforcement raided his home and where they found a weapon and more drugs. If that wasn't enough, the future rapper also learned his grandmother had been murdered, and the kicker, his girlfriend was also pregnant. So much changed in such little time, the rapper knew that he had to change as well, or he would suffer a fate just like his mother's. Learning that he was going to be a father was what really struck a chord with the rapper though. Having had his own father run out on him when he was still a child, he knew what it was was like to grow up without one. He said, "I wanted to be there to be a part of a child's life." After his arrest, 50 Cent could have gone away for 3 to 6 years, but would end up serving only 6 months by joining a program for first-time, non-violent offenders. Joining the program would give the rapper the time he needed to reevaluate his life. It was around this time Curtis Jackson would choose the name 50 Cent, inspired by a Brooklyn robber from the 1980s who was known by the same name. The rapper saw the name as a metaphor for change. In an interview with Stuff Magazine back in 2005, 50 Cent spoke about why he chose the name. He said, "It says everything I wanted to say. I'm the same kind of person 50 Cent was. I provide for myself by any means." Once 50 Cent was a free man, he decided to try his hand at hip-hop. He managed to have quite the mentor when a friend introduced him to Jam Master Jay, one of the major players in the industry from Run DMC. Jay taught 50 Cent the finer details of creating tracks, counting bars, writing choruses, and overall song structures. After drugs and boxing, it seemed like 50 Cent had finally found the thing that would get him out of South Jamaica and offer a better life: music. That was the driving force behind a lot of the rapper's decisions before he was shot. Whether he was dealing drugs, or spending hours boxing, or even learning how to write hooks from Jam Master Jay, he did it to have a better life, having grown up in abject poverty. After spending some time working with Jay, 50 Cent began making quite the impression in the rap scene as one to watch, which eventually led to him teaming up with platinum-selling producers, who signed him to Columbia Records. This was the rapper's first step towards superstardom. He was inches away from leaving his old life behind and stepping into a new one full of promise. But the thing is, 50 Cent's past was not done with him. Sure, most artists receive the most amount of love where they come from, but rappers being shot in their hometowns has been a disturbing trend that has been present in the rap scene for a long, long time. Up-and-coming rapper Lil Jojo was shot dead in his hometown of Chicago, with his death linked to gang-related activity. That's just one name among many, with well over a dozen rappers having been murdered in their own neighborhoods. This trend is what has led to some believing that rappers would be better off leaving their hometowns. Starting afresh without all the beef and issues of the past certainly sounds like a good idea, and if 50 Cent had made the decision to leave South Jamaica a little sooner, he likely would have escaped a near-death experience. 50 Cent wouldn't even be the first rapper hailing from Queens to be shot at. A rising star named Stack Bundles was shot in June 2007, to be followed by another promising artist named Chinks 8 years later. According to reports, Chinks was shot over a 6-year-old grudge, so it's safe to say that the crowds these artists rolled with were not the forgive and forget type. Just like Stack Bundles and Chinks, 50 Cent was on the cusp of greatness before he was shot. The only difference? Bundles and Chinks were killed, but against all odds, 50 managed to survive. Despite that though, the shooting could have derailed his entire career. All of us know that the rapper's debut studio album was the iconic Get Rich or Die Trying back in 2003, but if not for the shooting, it would have been Power of the Dollar 3 years earlier. Leading up to the release of the album, the rapper dropped 3 singles titled Your Life's on the Line, Thug Love, which also featured Destiny's Child, and lastly, How to Rob. The third track would get the most buzz and proved to be immensely controversial, because the lyrics were focused on how 50 would go about robbing big-time rappers. 50 had recorded 18 tracks for the LP, but after he was shot, Columbia Records decided to shelve the album and sever ties with the young rapper. That shooting wouldn't just shelve an album, it would change the course of 50 Cent's life, the shooting. Even though Power of the Dollar would never receive an official release, it is very possible that it turned 50 Cent into a massive target. 50 had been feuding with Ja Rule roughly around the time that he dropped How to Rob. As a matter of fact, the first single he dropped, Your Life's on the Line, saw 50 diss Ja Rule and his record label, Murder Inc. Records. Soon after the How to Rob dropped, 50 was stabbed at the Hit Factory by a Murder Inc. rapper in March 2000 and needed 3 stitches to close the wound. Then a couple of months later, 50 Cent would be shot 9 times in the middle of the day in front of his grandmother's house in South Jamaica. While appearing on an episode of Oprah's Next Chapter back in 2012, 50 spoke about what was going on just before the shooting. He said, "I arrived around 12 o'clock in the afternoon on May 24th. She was bent over in the yard planting flowers, and I moved over here to get in the vehicle where my companion was waiting for me, and a car pulled up on the side of us, and a guy stepped out of the passenger seat of that car, came round behind it, and shot through the actual car." 50 was shot in the hand, arm, chest, hip, legs, and face, but why? At this point, we all know that 50 Cent was a drug dealer for a while, but why had he been targeted at this point in his life? Soon after the shooting, it was revealed that a man named Daryl Baum was the one to have pulled the trigger. It was strange because Baum had been good friends with Mike Tyson and was even his bodyguard. Baum may have been the one to pull the trigger, but the odds are that someone else had sanctioned the hit. I will come back to that in just a bit. In the meantime, let me just wrap up Baum's story, which did not run very long after he shot 50 Cent. Just 3 weeks after the shooting happened, Baum was murdered in drug-related violence. Mike Tyson took the death really hard and apparently even put out a $500,000 bid to take out members of the gang that murdered his friend. Nothing came of it though, so Iron Mike was able to keep keep his hands clean. Soon after, 50 dropped How to Rob, which sparked a threatening response from the Wu-Tang Clan and Big Pun. But most reports suggest that a different track was the one that got the rapper in trouble. Ghetto Cuaron's lyrics were focused on the drug trade going on in South Jamaica, but worst of all, 50 Cent made the choice to name names in the track. Check out these lyrics and then I'll break down just who he pulled the curtain back on. Yo, when you hear talk of the South Side, you hear talk of the Team C feared Prince and respected Preem. For all you slow I'ma break it down. Illa C. Preem was the businessman and Prince was the killer. So what was the team? The Supreme Team was run by Kenneth Supreme McGriff. The team had a pretty big role to play in South Jamaica's drug operations because the team acted as Fat Cat Nichols' muscle on the streets. Together, they ran the drug scene in Baisley Park houses in Jamaica, Queens, close to where 50 would often deal himself. The Supreme Team was nothing short of brutal. They were violent, unpredictable, and did not do much to hide what they were up to because for a long time, no one really cared to intervene and stop what was happening in the region. But soon after Fat Cat was arrested, so was McGriff, and the team gradually fell apart. Once that happened, there was a vacuum of power. By the time 50 Cent really got into the world of drug dealing, that vacuum had been filled by Gerald Prince Miller, McGriff's extremely violent cousin. So going back to 50's lyrics, he said that while people on the street respected Supreme and saw him as a businessman, Prince was the killer of the two. Now this is where two of 50's rivals would see their paths cross. As 50 was moving up in the world, Supreme got out of prison and allied himself with Murder Inc. That's right, the Ja Rules record label, the same label 50 had been beefing with. Apparently, Supreme did not like the way the rapper had portrayed him in the track and wanted to get even, sanctioning the hit that Daryl Baum would eventually carry out. The IRS pretty much confirmed this partnership in an affidavit that read, "The investigation has uncovered a conspiracy involving McGriff and others to murder a rap artist who has released songs containing lyrics regarding McGriff's criminal activities. The rap artist was shot in 2000, survived, and thereafter refused to cooperate with law enforcement regarding the shooting. Messages transmitted over the Murder Inc. pager indicate that McGriff is involved in an ongoing plot to kill this rap artist and that he communicates with Murder Inc. employees concerning the target." Supreme calling for the hit is very possible when you think about it. At its peak, the Supreme Team used to bring in nearly $200,000 every single day. The team had even been linked to at least 8 murders in 1987 alone. Even if it was never confirmed, a former associate of Supreme's testified that he said the words, "I got him," once 50 Cent was shot down. Beyond running the streets and taking out low-level people who stood in their way, the Supreme Team was not above going to extreme lengths to hunt down and kill people that had wronged either them or Fat Cat, who supplied the group with a steady stream of cocaine. Supreme himself could not stay away from a life of crime. Over a 5-year period in the late 90s and early 2000s, he built a massive criminal network, one far larger than the Supreme Team, and expanded his business beyond New York and dealt with far larger quantities of drugs, almost like a wholesale seller. This massive enterprise meant that Supreme had become more ruthless than ever. He hired hitmen to take out a rapper named E Moneybags because he was allegedly involved in the murder of a Supreme Team member named Black Just. Black Just one of the older members in the enterprise and even had a small boxing gym. That's right, the same boxing gym that 50 Cent used to spend a bunch of time in. Then he hired guys to take out one of Moneybags' allies as well, to ensure that no one could retaliate against him. Supreme's reign of terror would not last for very long though. In February 2007, he would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for racketeering, 2 murder-for-hire homicides, narcotics trafficking, and engaging in illegal financial transactions with drug money. While speaking about Kenneth Supreme McGriff's conviction, a United States attorney stated, "He devoted the better part of 2 decades to gangs, drug trafficking, and violence, treating his prior sentences as mere interruptions in his pursuit of a life of crime. We are gratified that McGriff will now spend the rest of his life behind bars." This was the kind of man that 50 Cent pissed off, a man who built not 1, but 2 criminal enterprises that dominated the drug trade while not thinking twice about bringing violence to the streets and murdering anyone who stood in his way. 50 would be shot in front of his grandmother's house just a couple of days before he was supposed to shoot the music video for Thug Love. In an interview, 50 talked about his immediate reaction the moment he was shot. He said, "After they finished shooting, I was looking in the rear view mirror like, oh somebody shot me in the face. It burns, 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 burns. The adrenaline is pumping so fast that the pain is not really that bad until the doctor's finished with you. Then that morphine wears off, and then you're introduced to the pain." Let's do a quick recap. 50 started dealing drugs when he was really young, but decided to clean up his act to a degree free after getting busted twice in 2 weeks back in 1994. After that, he decided to make the move to hip-hop and was mentored by Jam Master Jay. He started making waves almost immediately and was signed to Columbia Records, but his first singles would piss off all the wrong people and make him a target. There was the stabbing at the Hit Factory just days before the shooting that would leave him just seconds away from death. While it was never officially confirmed, Kenneth Supreme McGriffin was the one who sanctioned the hit of 50. Supreme worked with Fat Cat Nichols to run drugs in the region, and after he got out of prison, he formed an alliance with Murder Inc. Records. 50 Cent had been feuding with Ja Rule, so it made sense for Supreme to team up with them while simultaneously building another criminal enterprise far bigger than the first one. Anyway, Daryl Baum pulled the trigger, shooting 50 9 times, but the rapper would survive and then begin to thrive, carving a path to greatness. The aftermath. In light of the shooting, Columbia wanted pretty much nothing to do with 50, but that was the least of the rapper's concerns. He spent 13 days in the hospital, and his recovery took 5 months overall. Other than the scars, getting shot in the month left 50 with a somewhat slurred voice that makes him sound so distinct on the microphone. After leaving the hospital, 50 really focused on his fitness regime, which allowed him to put on a ton of muscle. But beyond the physical changes, the entire ordeal brought about a mental shift as well. 50 Cent had looked death in the eye and stared it down. There were very few things that could rattle him anymore. An excerpt from his biography gave readers insight into how the rapper viewed death after the shooting. He wrote, "I don't necessarily view death as something negative. Death gives meaning to life. Living in fear of death is living in denial. Actually, it's not really living at all because there is no life without death. It's two sides of the one. You can't pick up one side and say, I'm just going to use the head side. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to pick up both sides because nothing is promised to anyone in this world besides death." 50 Cent became the man who defied death, and in the eyes of regular folks, he was as tough as they came. There was everybody else, and then there was 50. And the reason that perception stuck around is because the rapper actually backed up what he and everybody else were saying. His music career should have been dead after Columbia dropped him, but nothing was going to stop 50 from achieving greatness. Over the course of the next couple of years, 50 formed G-Unit and decided to focus on putting out mixtapes. Before you know it, he was one of the hottest unsigned artists in the industry once more. By the time 2002 rolled around, a bidding war was well underway. In the end, Eminem emerged victorious, signing 50 to Shady Records and Aftermath Entertainment, run by M and Dr. Dre respectively. 50's addition to the roster completely changed how everyone in the crew rolled. D12's Bizarre talked about how 50 Cent shook things up after signing. He said, "Definitely changed like how we was moving. We was in some shit. We had to roll out the military. You know what I'm saying? Bulletproof vests, bulletproof cars. You know we didn't really have to worry about that before him." 50 was an artist unlike anyone had ever seen before. Even the once great Suge Knight could do anything to faze him. Let me set the scene for you. In 2003, Get Rich or Die Tryin' was one of the most hotly anticipated hip-hop albums since Snoop Dogg dropped Doggy Style back in November 1993. 50 was shooting the music video for In Day Club when they learned that Suge was on his way to the set. When the co-founder of Death Row Records did pull up, he didn't come alone. Bizarre said, "It was like a standoff. I know it sounds like a fool made-up movie, but it's really true. We was shooting the Inda Club video and somebody said, 'Suge Knight here.' I was at the bar, gang was there, and they stopped and Suge came in with 30 Mexicans. I just remember Smurf or 50 was like, 'What's up, man? What you want to do?' Suge looked at him and he took a puff of his cigar and he blew it out and he did like this and he left. Just some LA type intimidation type. The crazy thing is, 50 could not have cared less. As a matter of fact, he stepped right up to Suge, and when he saw one of his goons had a gun on him, he decided he needed to put the disgraced rap mogul in his place. 50 went to his trailer and came back with an Uzi. That wasn't all. He actually chased Suge and his thugs off the set. It was crazy. While Suge had failed to intimidate other rappers in the past, no one had made a fool of him the way 50 did. It was this kind of fearlessness that made 50 Cent one of the most respected and intimidating men the hip-hop world had ever seen. 50 was always a guy you did not want to mess with, but after he survived the shooting, he became truly fearless. Get Rich or Die Tryin' became a massive success when it was released, selling nearly 900,000 units within 5 days. Over the next decade or so, 50 dropped 4 more studio albums, and while none of them were as successful or his first effort, he remained a big player in the industry. As the years passed, the rapper also decided to diversify. 50 showed an interest in acting all the way back in 2005, when he acted in a film that was based on the events of his own life. The film's name? Get rich or die trying. Since then, 50 has acted in roughly 30 films, with him expected to star in the 4th film of the Expendables franchise. He is also pulling double duty on Stars' Power, acting in the show and also serving as one of its executive producers. Unlike a lot of other artists who blow all over their money quicker than it can come in, 50 played the long game. The rapper used almost all the money he was earning from his music and other endorsements to invest in a wide array of businesses. One of his most successful investments was also one of the first ones he ever made. 50 had a stake in Vitamin Water's parent company, Energy Drinks. When it was bought out by Coca-Cola in 2007, the rapper's stake in the company earned him $100 million after taxes. That would be just one of several industries the rapper would invest in. 50 has had his own clothing line, video games, and film production companies, in addition to a massive real estate portfolio. One of the craziest stories from 50's life probably has to be about the rapper potentially investing in a South African mine that was a treasure trove for metals like palladium, iridium, and platinum. The rapper apparently wanted to buy an equity stake and bring 50 Cent branded platinum to the world. While talking about the potential investment, the rapper gave some insight into his approach to investing when he said he wanted to put his money into things that people wouldn't actually expect me to be involved in. I've got a diverse portfolio. That has sort of been 50's mantra ever since the shooting, defying expectations and doing things people would not expect of him. His journey has been far from smooth since the shooting. I mean, he did file for bankruptcy back in 2015, but his legacy is set in stone. He has given the industry some of the most iconic tracks of all time, and people all around the world cannot get enough of him, with his Final Lap tour kicking off in July 2023 and featuring a bunch of international performances before the end of the year. 50 Cent remains one of the most recognizable names in the industry, and who knows what his career would have looked like if he had never been shot. That event changed the trajectory of his entire life, giving the world the 50 we know today. Chronologically moving through the last 24 hours before the shooting would have done a disservice to the rapper's story. That single event was the consequence of a lifetime of actions, culminating in 9 bullets that indirectly catapulted him to greatness. The man who shot him died soon after. The man who allegedly sanctioned the hit is sitting behind bars, but 50 Cent has survived and he has thrived. It was almost poetic that he was shot in front of his grandmother's house. It was at that house where he learned that life was hard, setting him on a path that has claimed countless lives and almost claimed his too. The 24 hours before the shooting were the last page of that chapter in his life. When he came out at the other end of it, he was a changed man and was undeniably better off for it. From rolling in bulletproof vests and pulling Uzis out of trailers, 50 Cent has successfully become a respected investor, leaving a life that would have led him to an early grave. That journey remains incomplete without those last 24 hours before Darrell Bound pulled the trigger on him in the middle of the day. This line from The 50th Law, a book 50 wrote alongside Robert Greene, perfectly captures what it means to be 50 Cent. When you work for others, you are at their mercy. They own your work, they own you. Your creative spirit is squashed. What keeps you in such positions is a fear of having to sink or swim on your own. Instead, you should have a greater fear of what will happen to you if you remain dependent on others for power. Your goal in every maneuver in life must be ownership, working the corner for yourself. When it is yours to lose, you are more motivated, more creative, more alive. The ultimate power in life is to be completely self-reliant, completely yourself. Those were the terms 50 Cent chose to live his life by. The words that drove him not just in the last 24 hours before he got shot, but all the 24 hours that came after. And that's our video. If you liked what you just saw, check one of these out too. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.